Good morning, welcome back to the channel. I appreciate you signing in today. We're currently in 2 Kings, but before we begin or continue, we're going to do our prayer. Father, as I read and receive your word, may it deeply be rooted in me, so when difficulty comes, it will be your word that encourages and strengthens me. Amen. Alright, so we're going to, as I mentioned, continue 2 Kings. Today we're at chapter 24, and we're actually going to finish up 2 Kings today. During Jehoiachin's reign, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon invaded the land of Judah. Jehoiachin surrendered and paid him tribute for 3 years, but then rebelled. Then the Lord sent bands of Babylonians, Aramean, Moabite, and Ammonite raiders against Judah to destroy it, just as the Lord had promised through his prophets. These disasters happened to Judah according to the Lord's command. He had decided to remove Judah from his presence because of the many sins of Manasseh. He had filled Jerusalem with innocent blood, and the Lord would not forgive this. The rest of the events in Jehoiakim's reign and all his deeds are recorded in the book of the history of the kings of Judah. When Jehoiakim died, his son Jehoiachin became the next king. The king of Egypt never returned after that, for the king of Babylon occupied the entire area formerly claimed by Egypt, from the brook of Egypt to the Euphrates River. Jehoiachin rules in Judah. Jehoiachin was 18 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 3 months. His mother was Nehushta, the daughter of Elnathan from Jerusalem. Jehoiachin did what was evil in the Lord's sight, just as his father had done. During Jehoiachin's reign, the officers of King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon came up against Jerusalem and besieged it. Nebuchadnezzar himself arrived at the city during the siege. Then King Jehoiachin, along with his advisors, nobles, and officials, and the queen mother, surrendered to the Babylonians. In the 8th year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign, he took Jehoiachin prisoner. As the Lord had said beforehand, Nebuchadnezzar carried away all the treasures from the Lord's temple and the royal palace. They cut apart all the gold vessels that King Solomon of Israel had placed in the temple. King Nebuchadnezzar took 10,000 captives from Jerusalem, including all the princes and the best of the soldiers, craftsmen, and smiths. So only the poorest people were left in the land. Nebuchadnezzar led King Jehoiachin away as a captive to Babylon, along with his wives and officials, the queen mother, and all Jerusalem's elite. He also took 7,000 of the best troops and 1,000 craftsmen and smiths, all of whom were strong and fit for war. Then the king of Babylon installed Mattaniah, Jehoiachin's uncle, as the next king, and he changed Mattaniah's name to Zedekiah. Zedekiah rules in Judah. Zedekiah was 21 years old when he became king. He reigned in Jerusalem 11 years. His mother was Hamutal, the daughter of Jeremiah, from Libnah. But Zedekiah did what was evil in the Lord's sight, just as Jehoiakim had done. So the Lord in his anger finally banished the people of Jerusalem and Judah from his presence and sent them into exile. The fall of Jerusalem. Then Zedekiah rebelled against the king of Babylon. Chapter 25. So on January 15th, during the 9th year of Zedekiah's reign, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon led his entire army against Jerusalem. They surrounded the city and built siege ramps against its walls. Jerusalem was kept under siege until the 11th year of King Zedekiah's reign. By July 18th of Zedekiah's 11th year, the famine in the city had become very severe, with the last of the food entirely gone. Then a section of the city wall was broken down, and all the soldiers made plans to escape from the city. But since the city was surrounded by the Babylonians, they waited for nightfall and fled through the gate between the 2 walls behind the king's gardens. They made a dash across the fields in the direction of the Jordan Valley. But the Babylonians chased after them and caught the king on the plains of Jericho, for by then his men had all abandoned him. They brought him to the king of Babylon at Riblah, where sentence was passed against him. The king of Babylon made Zedekiah watch as all his sons were killed. Then they gouged out Zedekiah's eyes, bound him in bronze chains, and led him away to Babylon. The temple destroyed. On August 14th of that year, which was 19th year of King Nebuchadnezzar's reign, Nebuzaradan, captain of the guard and official of the Babylonian king, arrived in Jerusalem. He burned down the temple of the Lord, the royal palace, and all the houses of Jerusalem. He destroyed all the important buildings in the city. Then the captain of the guard supervised the entire Babylonian army as they tore down the walls of Jerusalem. Nebuzaradan, captain of the guard, then took as the exiles those who remained in the city, along with the rest of the people and the troops who had declared their allegiance to the king of Babylon. But the captain of the guard allowed some of the poorest people to stay behind in Judah to care for the vineyards and fields. The Babylonians broke up the bronze pillars, the bronze water carts, and the bronze sea that were at the Lord's temple, and they carried all the bronze away to Babylon. They also took all the pots, shovels, lamps, snuffers, dishes, and all the other bronze utensils used for making sacrifices at the temple. Nebuzaradan, captain of the guard, also took the fire pans and basins and all the other utensils made of pure gold or silver. The bronze from the 2 pillars, the water carts, and the sea was too great to be weighed. These things had been made for the Lord's temple in the days of King Solomon. Each of the pillars was 27 feet tall. The bronze capital on top of each pillar was 7.5 feet high and was decorated with a network of bronze pomegranates all the way around. The captain of the guard took with him as prisoner Syria, the chief priest, his assistant Zephaniah, and the 3 chief gatekeepers. And all the people still hide in the city. He took an officer of the Judean army, 5 of the king's personal advisors, the army commander's chief secretary, who was in charge of recruitment, and 60 other citizens. Nebuzaradan, the commander, took them all to the king of Babylon at Riblah. And there at Riblah, in the land of Hamath, the king of Babylon had them all put to death. So the people of Judah were sent into exile from their land. Gedalia governed in Judah. Then King Nebuchadnezzar appointed Gedalia, son of Jehoiachin, and grandson of Shaphan, as governor over the people left in Judah. When all the army commanders and their men learned that the king of Babylon had appointed Gedalia as governor, they joined him at Mizpah. These included Ishmael, son of Nethaniah, Johanan, son of Kareah, Sariah, son of Tanhumeth, the Netophathite, and Jaazaniah, son of Maacathite, and all their men. Gedalia vowed to them that the Babylonian officials meant them no harm. Live in the land and serve the king of Babylon, and all will go well for you, he promised. But in mid-autumn of that year, Ishmael, son of Nethaniah, and grandson of Elishama, who was loyal to the royal family, went to Mizpah with 10 men and assassinated Gedalia and everyone with him, both Judeans and Babylonians. Then all the people of Judah, from the least to the greatest, as well as the army commanders, fled in panic to Egypt, for they were afraid of what the Babylonians would do to them. Hope for Israel's royal lines. In the 37th year of King Jehoiachin's exile in Babylon, evil Merodach ascended to the Babylonian throne. He was kind to Jehoiachin and released him from prison on April 2nd of that year. He spoke pleasantly to Jehoiachin and gave him preferential treatment over all the other exiled kings in Babylon. He supplied Jehoiachin with new clothes to replace his prison garb and allowed him to dine at the king's table for the rest of his life. The Babylonian king also gave him a regular allowance to cover his living expenses until the day of his death. Okay, that's the end of 2 Kings. And as we did before, 2 Kings, the author was unknown. The date was 6th century BC. The content of 2 Kings covers a period of approximately 250 years, during which two national tragedies occurred. In 772 BC, the northern kingdom of Israel was destroyed by the Assyrians, and in 586 BC, the southern kingdom of Judah was destroyed by the Babylonians. The reigns of the various kings are described in some detail, with care being taken to show the spiritual significance of their actions. Throughout this period of good and bad kings, war and peace, prosperity and ruin, God was still at work, primarily through the prophets he sent to remind the people of God's ways and to warn them of coming trouble if they didn't turn back to him. The theme is God's involvement with people, events, and even nations is seen throughout this book. The rulers may think they're in control, but even the enemies of God's people fit into God's plan. Their evil is used to punish God's own wayward people. Sin invariably brings judgment upon the people of Israel and Judah, and moral, holy living brings God's blessing. 2 Kings also shows that God never sends judgment without a warning first. Well, thank you for joining me today. I appreciate you going through 2 Kings with me. I know I learned a lot. First time reading that book as well, along with all the other ones as I've mentioned. I've took a lot from this myself. And anyway, so we'll start Chronicles. Well, it looks like First Chronicles. We have 2 Chronicles. We'll start First Chronicles tomorrow. And I hope you have a great day and a blessed day. That's what we're going to. And I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you.